Oh,
Now.
okay.
You're looking at now.
No.
Can we go back to then? You missed it.
It's too late.
Just now. All right. You guys want to do a podcast?
I suppose.
Sure.
An overabundance of enthusiasm, fellas. I appreciate it.
The energy in this room.
Let's just don't bring too much fire today, now, gentlemen. I don't want to.
Oh, that was fun.
All right.
I wish StreamYard worked for me properly. I
Can you still not see comments?
I can't see comments, dude. It's so annoying. Like,
We'll
I can see private chats.
That's good.
Yeah.
Someone
LOL.
wants to know if pants are still optional, AJ.
I am not wearing any. I had a conversation yesterday. I retweeted a friend of mine, Samantha, who had like made this hilarious graph about like during quarantine the changing of prioritization of different things. And she had like
I saw that.
she had like sweatpants went way up, and I was like, no, I just gave up on pants.
Just why even bother?
I feel
at that point?
for dudes on that list, like pants are where bras went. Like,
Yeah, 100%, 100%. For the dude version of that, you take out bras and you just put in pants.
Yep.
And it just plummets because it was like, no, it's been amazing in terms of laundry because it's just like half my clothes I don't wash anymore because I don't wear them.
It's so perfect. I got roommates, so that brings a whole other.
Oh yeah,
for
see,
long. So like
I have
at the top
roommates
of my
too.
list, as soon as those roommates are gone, no pants.
See, I have roommates too, but I live in the basement, and like I strategically go up. The kitchen is connected to the basement, and so I pick the times when I go upstairs so that I just don't have to throw them on.
There you go.
And to be honest, a couple of times I've been there, and like they see me and I don't have pants on, I'm just like, hey.
Whatever, man. We're all manscaped. You can be confident about it.
I'm not gonna make this awkward. If you're gonna make this awkward, this is your problem, bud.
It's on you.
That's right. I'm not playing.
And on that note, welcome into the DNVR Gaming Podcast presented by WGT Golf, the most popular and beloved free golf game in the world. You can download it at dnvrgolf.com. We all love it. We all play it. You can challenge us. Pretty much anybody on the DNVR staff. You can participate in tournaments on most Sundays. You can find us out there challenging each other and ourselves. Last week was just brutal on everybody involved. It was specifically designed to be so. Our guy Patrick Lyons described it as trying to putt to the top of a pyramid. But it was fun, and we all learned a lot about our own tolerance for pain.
Easy week.
Yeah, you know how I solved that problem?
What's that?
I did not participate.
I
I was the one who set up the tournament. I knew what was coming, and I said, nope.
sat back to watch it like a crazy person, like
Yep,
a madman, watching it.
You know you know that famous GIF with Elmo where he's like,
Yeah.
and it's fire behind him. That was me every single time a tweet came in. Like, God, that course was impossible. I was Elmo.
Like, I know.
It was so satisfying.
So I am, of course, your host, Drew Kreisman. With me are AJ and Rudo from the Avs and Gaming Beat, of course. And today we're going to talk about video games as art, a topic that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts, and one I've always been very interested in because I think it's, in the infancy of video games, was a very difficult conversation to have because at their core, they sort of separated themselves as a medium from books, TV, movies, as being games that are interactive that you play to have fun. That's the number one thing. So like a game doesn't need to be art, right? It is not essential to it existing, which I think is a really interesting way to have the conversation. No one who's listened to this is going to be surprised about like where I first really started to think about games as art. If you've heard me talk about my favorite series, AJ, since you you brought up this topic, I wanted to see if you could give us, sort of your origin story, but the beginnings of this conversation in your world.
So, because of my origins as a gamer, Mario, DuckTales, lots of sports games.
Mm-hmm.
It took some time for me to kind of come around, and it wasn't so much that I didn't think that video games were art. It was more just that I never contemplated it. It never occurred to me. And when you're 9 years old, you're not like having that kind of conversation with yourself where you're playing a game and you're like, is this art? Is this an emotional impact that I feel? Because you're just trying, you're getting to the end of the level, and that little bastard just tells you that the princess is in another castle, and you're like, how many times are we gonna do this, dude? So, like it gets a little old, but you don't think of that as art.
Right.
I do think that for me, obviously the Mass Effect series had a profound impact on me, but the first time that I ever really thought about it and was like, this is a masterpiece in terms of its creation and its storytelling and its level design and especially its use of sound, was Bioshock. I think that was the one that really kind of set it apart for me. Like,
sorry, keep going. I gotta go grab a thing.
Oh, I see. I didn't know what was happening. It was that, like, I had played games with great storylines that kind of hit me emotionally, but the first game that I ever played that I ever sat down and started to consider like the creation of, okay, there's a team of people that made this and they came up with the concept of this and they crafted and honed and chiseled away at this thing, because it wasn't like they just sat down and like first time through, oh, that's all the levels, Yep. That's the level design. That's where you put the big daddies to make your life miserable. And this is the combination of powers. And this is, it took time. It took planning. It took a lot of honing of the craft. And that was the first game that really stood out to me where I thought, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah, but is this a masterpiece?
Ace Combat
sickness needs to go away.
It evolved over the years, and they started telling some weird and interesting stories in those games when they did start out as fighty shooty plane jet games. And that's when I think they're
it's still fighty plane jet shooty games.
But now they've got anime stories that go with them, basically. No, I think Bioshock is a really interesting game in this conversation, because it so specifically was built the way a lot of great art is, which is not, it's very clearly not just for entertainment, right? And I often, and I don't think those two things have to be separate, but I think that's an interesting distinction to draw, right? Is this just to entertain me, or is this challenging me, asking me questions, purposefully trying to play with my expectations and emotions a little bit? It doesn't just want me to be comfortable the whole time. I think that's another good indication that you're experiencing art as opposed to just pure entertainment.
Yeah, and anybody that's played Bioshock and is familiar with the story and kind of how it goes knows that it definitely went beyond the video game. Like they had something to say with that game.
Right. Rudo, do you have a similar type of game that's played this influence in your world?
Yeah. There's a game and a series of games that I've come to see as art a lot more today, but at first when I played them, I again, like AJ, was probably too young to really grasp and understand that. So the first game that I really felt, oh, this is more than just a video game, this is like an art form, was Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Just the absurdly massive world that they put out there with the number of events. There were probably games and certainly sports games were something that you couldn't realistically 100% a game in, but Oblivion was the first game where I felt like I could live in this world, and like I would get enjoyment out of literally just walking around the world and looking at pretty things and being like, this is amazing. And so not only was it, first of all, a step up to the Xbox 360, so the next gen consoles were starting to put quality graphics out to a certain extent, and then kind of like AJ said with Bioshock, you get to the end of that game and the credits are like 8 minutes long of just a billion people, and you're like, oh my god, there was a lot of work put into this.
Yeah. That was, I think that game was rightfully given a lot of credit in this conversation as well for taking that next step to the point where, you know, it was far less debatable the amount of the quality of that game. Like you said, you really can't, you have a much harder time separating that from like a blockbuster Hollywood experience, for example.
There was actually a funny story about this game. So my brother and I played it a lot, and for all of its greatness, there were plenty of glitches in this game. And my brother figured out a way to where you could jump around and jump into the main city without getting everything to load. And then it would shatter the save forever to where the main city would no longer load properly. And I was very upset that I could no longer look at all the prettiness in the main city, because it would just be like floating doors and stuff instead of like pretty walls and an actual built city.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting too. It's like, because again, it's the interactiveness of it, which in many ways I think elevates the ability for it to be art. Like, there's no rule that art can't be interactive in the first place. So, I mean, obviously, my origin story on this is the same as mine with video games. I came to this pretty early. I was doing some math just before we came on. I was born in '86. We bought Final Fantasy VI in 1996. So at 10 years old, you know, and I think it really helped that I had a brother who's about 4.5 years older than me. We were playing the games together, and, you know, I had somebody to help me explain some of the more adult things that were going on, because we weren't expecting it to. The sort of irony of it was that we went to visit an uncle of ours who was kind of a gamer, and I really wanted to play Mortal Kombat. And I'm like 10 years old, right? But like, that's what I wanted to do. And I think they kind of just put this other game in front of us as like yeah, you're maybe a little young for Mortal Kombat. What do you think of this? And at first I was like, I don't know what I think of this. But then we fell in love with it. And then as we went through, you know, like a guy poisons a castle's water supply in that game. There's a lot of adult content.
Ends the world.
He takes over the world, murders a great deal of people, and reshapes the face of the planet. A character attempts to commit suicide. A main hero in that character attempts suicide. A guy's whole family and small child are killed on screen. And so, for me,
kept him in business.
Right? That game was messed up, dude. So, like, I have this very brief period of time as like a young kid, like on the regular Nintendo, of like Mario and Mega Man and Excitebike. But like, video games as art have been there for me since I was 9 or 10 years old, because we gravitated very early on to these types of games that, again, we're very purposefully trying to challenge you, present you with these things. How do you feel about this? What do you think about this? What is, at the end of Final Fantasy VI, they basically just have a giant debate about the nature of nihilism and whether or not it actually makes any sense to hope. And I'm like 10 years old, sitting there, like, asking myself the question, why should people try to build things up if everything is ultimately destroyed? That's a big ass question for a 10-year-old to be asking themselves. And I think I came into stories asking me important questions through video games more than through books or television or movies. It kind of opened my eyes. Final Fantasies 6 and 7 in particular opened my eyes to, like, yeah, stories are not just entertainment, as it were. And so there have been, several others. Obviously, everyone knows that's my favorite franchise, and that's probably the reason why. But I also think Metal Gear Solid, I've talked about that a lot over the years. I think, a purposefully fourth wall breaking, and it's actually insane if you go back now and play Metal Gear Solids 1 and 2 in particular, and the conversation they're having about private military contracts and the way proxy wars are fought basically as a way to create a kind of economy. It's and this was before any of us knew what Blackwater was, stuff like that. Like, those games are extraordinarily challenging.
I think that Rudo brought up an interesting point with the Oblivion and, like, the big open world. Because I was never really into those games, so my path to the open world was basically GTA.
Sure.
And like
a different form of art, maybe.
Slightly different.
Well, and watching how that franchise matured.
Yeah.
And how it started to take itself more seriously with every iteration, while also, like, having a personality and having fun. But, like, having played GTA, 1 and 2, where it was just top down and you're driving around in a car and, doing your thing, you can hop out and do whatever, but it was so different. And then, 3 was like, whoa. And everybody was playing it, and it was like, wow, you can escape the cops by painting your car. And, like, it was kind of absurd, right? And all anybody wanted to talk about was hookers.
Right.
Like, you can kill them and get your money back. And it was like, what the like, and so it was
so many other things you can do.
Well, and, like, that was, like, sort of like its reputation was like,
right.
You do the crimes. And like, at a certain age, like, there were certain crimes that appealed to you more. And then, like, as I got older, and then, like, as those games kept getting made, Vice City, I played a ton of Vice City, and then 4 happened, and 4 was like, it felt like such a big step forward in how seriously Rockstar took the making of it.
Yeah.
And the campaign for a lot of those games, like the story of everything, was sort of a vehicle to access the city. You had to play through it if you wanted to do if you wanted to have access to the whole city. But that wasn't starting. I think it was really in 4 that it started to change, where they took storytelling to a different level.
Yeah.
And they started combining a really, really, really in-depth story. Whether or not you cared about Nico Bellic or not, they introduced a lot of interesting characters, a lot of whole new interactions, and they built a very different, interactive, more emotional space than they ever had before. And I thought it was really, I loved it in 4, the way that the franchise kind of took a step forward, took itself seriously, and cared more about this aspect of it. Because it really felt like it rounded it out. They already had done a great job of making open worlds that were fun to play and that you could do all kinds of crazy stuff. And then they were like, hey, why don't we just take it seriously?
What if you cared about some people inside of that world?
Right. Well, and then that led to Red Dead Redemption.
Right.
And then Red Dead Redemption 2, which I have but have not played the campaign on it. But it's, there, see? Red Dead Redemption 2. And like that sort of set that tone for that as a company, for them to say, hey, we can take this more seriously. We can do this. And then in 5, it was so fascinating in 5, the way that they told the story through 3 distinct characters.
Yeah.
I know not everybody loved it. It certainly had its problems. The characters felt a little too one note at times, among other things, but the way that they told that story, I thought their approach to it was so cool, because they took this open world and then they just kept building, right? They kept stacking things on top of it. Okay, it's an open world. We're going to add a great story. And now we're going to add a completely different storytelling element that you have not seen in other games, where we're telling it through the eyes of multiple distinct characters.
It's a really clever way to look, in any open world game, you can just roll out into the world and do whatever you want, right? But at a certain point, you're going to come back around to the main story, and being able to tell that story from multiple points of view is a very good way to break it up. It doesn't feel like you're experiencing something linear when you do that.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of appreciation for linear gameplay on this podcast, but
totally. I mean, if you could tell a good linear story, do it.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting, and Rudo, I want to get you back in here on this, but Will sort of providing us with maybe a potential, not working definition, but an idea here. He says, I think if you can, play through a game and think this would make an awesome Netflix series, it probably falls into the art category. I think that's a solid way to think about it, but I do think that there are games as art that probably could not be made into Netflix series, and I'm going to try to think of some examples of one, but Rudo, I want you to sort of jump in there on all those. And also wanted to throw out, because Will also mentioned Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't know if any of us have played that yet, but I've heard very good things about it.
Based in Colorado.
Oh.
Or at least part of it. Anyway, it's an interesting one for me. I guess we can go back to my favorite Legend of Zelda for not you two. And on the N64, I didn't understand it at the time, and previous ones as well. But something I've come to appreciate as an artful thing as I've gotten older is video game lore. The Ocarina of Time starts with a grandiose story about the history of the world and how this hero rises every generation to defeat evil and all of that. And they speak of ancient powers and all of these things that, as an adult, if I had the time, I would love to experience that. I would love to. It leaves me wanting more. And I know that there are stories out there that make this world much more than even what the player gets to see. And back then, it wasn't at quite the same level it is now, but like now you take Breath of the Wild and you climb a mountain and you can look out over this land and see like this massive universe that has been built and has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I've come to appreciate that, I understand that those hundreds of years never really happened on this land, but it's easy to imagine how they could have.
How many of the games could have taken place at the area that you're overlooking? Yeah,
exactly. So...
And then a train rolls through and you're like, oh, Spirit Tracks. That happened.
Right. That was a
game. So to get back to this conversation, I think Ouroboros brings up a good point that something like Mass Effect I think you could maybe do it as a Netflix series, but there are a lot of landmines there because so much of the game hinges on your own story, on you.
You could definitely... Right? I've always thought that Mass Effect should be a movie, and you just pick... like you
version of it,
you make the choices. And while it loses the impact of the choices, it doesn't lose the impact of what a great story it still is overall. I mean, the story of, are you kidding me? Like the story of the Reapers and like the way that the humans made contact with all the aliens and the Citadel, and like you could branch out and do you could do a series on anything in that universe, and it would have potential to be fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
So you make the make your own adventure series of Mass Effect on Netflix, and then you don't choose to save Ashley, and it cuts to the guy saying, "Wrong choice, mate." Got it.
Yeah. You choose to you try and save Katie,
interactive and Netflix now. Yeah.
Cuts it off.
I'd be so down for that. And Dan asks about Assassin's Creed, which they did do, and I didn't watch because it got horrible reviews, and it's really disappointing because that seems like it would be one, again, that's relatively easy, but very few people, in fact, nobody has really figured out the magic formula, maybe other than the Castlevania Netflix guys, on how to turn video games into a proper series or even a movie that's like better than okay.
I mean, The Witcher was very, very good. It was very, very good.
God, I missed The Witcher.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Yes, video games do have a long history of botching video format.
Yeah. Oh, The Witcher was so good, and I apologize again. that show was so damn good. I actually want to dive a little deeper into that conversation a bit too, but before I get away from it, I thought of a couple because I think that's interesting. Which story games, but I think there are games as art, like I don't know if anybody ever played Entwined or Journey is the more popular version. These sort of smaller.
The worst game of the year ever. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy Journey.
Fair enough.
But you go back and you look at some of the games that it beat out for Game of the Year, and it just makes you want to.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have given it Game of the Year, but I do think Journey was very good, and I do think it's a remarkable piece of art, and I don't know that you could turn it into a Netflix series.
You could make it Experience of the Year, but don't call it Game of the Year.
Yeah. I do like that they've added at the Game Awards, like the Games as Arts category. Like what we're talking about here is even a whole thing now. Celeste was one that came out recently that I did not play. I've heard a lot about that. Seems like it's extraordinary piece of art that, again, I'm not sure you could turn into a movie or a show directly. It doesn't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of. I think developers figured out that they could do a lot of like visual novel type games. Yep. Like, if you ever play a game like Firewatch,
right?
That was a perfect, like, you don't do a lot in that game, but you just sort of experience the world that they created for you, and it's awesome. And I think that counts as I would say that has a very artistic slant to it. That you maybe even more of an art. It's more art than raw video game.
Yeah.
Right, and I think we're seeing more and more of those. Just here's a thing you can exist inside of, because in 1991 you couldn't do that. Your game had to be a game. It better be
jump and shoot, man. Jump and shoot.
Right. Further along those lines, are there any that we've left out that you think, man, there's Lost that we've left out. You're like, that'd make a great movie. That'd make a great television series.
I mean, Uncharted obviously should be an easy movie franchise.
Easy.
That should have already happened. Some of them feel like layups. Like we did the episode last week on games that we wanted to see made that haven't been made yet.
Right.
Some of these also feel like layups where you're just like, look, this is a cinematic adventure anyway. Somebody could sit and watch me play this and it would be like, oh, this is just a really long 25-hour movie.
Yeah.
And then you just streamline it. You cut out all of the you dying and some of the climbing and a lot of the combat. Like you gotta pick the combat the combat scenes that you need. You definitely remove the dumb final boss fight and you're good. Like okay, great. This is the adventure. This is the cinematic adventure. Following Nathan Drake as he hunts treasure. Like, come on. Easy. Slam dunk that.
Yeah. other that I thought have been layups that it blows my mind that people haven't turned them into movies. Halo's they've tried a couple of times, but it's like this is not a complicated formula here.
Yeah, that one I really don't understand why it hasn't happened. It's got the name brand recognition that everybody knows. Like Uncharted is like a video game thing, but even if you don't play games seriously, you've heard of Halo.
I mean, you want an artistic moment. Halo, the first time you look up and see the ring is like,
right. You're like, oh, what's this?
Just you talking about it. Got my hair
or like when he jumps out of the ship and he's just like, all right, I'm out.
We good.
I'm gonna go do it on my own now. And you're just like,
imagine being in a packed theater for that final level in Halo 1. All right, we got to get out.
Yeah, right?
Hop in the Warthog and go.
Yeah, straight up. And they don't have to worry about like it. Oh, you're missing a person, so the weight is a little bit off, and so you ended up on the nose a little, and so it flipped over, and then you got to flip the Warthog, and then the timer is still running, and you got to get in, you got to straighten it out, and you got to like it would be totally cinematic, and like I've seen every Fast and Furious movie out there. You could make it awesome.
Yeah.
You could make it like Fast and the Furious 6 had the longest runway of all time in it. Like it was like a 17-minute scene with them just with the airplane like on the runway and like they're fighting dudes, and I'm like, come on, you could definitely do a badass Warthog scene at the end of that movie.
Two master, two chief.
That's exactly what you would call the second movie. Two master, two chief. Perfect.
I'll buy my tickets when they announce.
And then the third one is chief, except the E is a 3.
Where'd you say?
Boom!
Hollywood, our phones are
We
available.
got you, Hollywood. You guys are out of ideas. We are not.
Not even a little bit. Rudo, what else you got?
Oh boy.
How do you follow that? Halo we nailed. We've sold that to the studio.
Yeah, I don't know how sold I am on trying to create video game movies because of that fear that they are just going to screw them up and not follow the story at all.
Yeah.
But as far as art forms go, what I'm trying to think of ones that are like have the prettiest video games I've ever played.
Trine,
yeah.
Okay.
The Ori games.
Yeah, Ori and the Blind Forest, another one in the like kind of Journey series a little bit.
Yeah.
Celeste and that type of thing. Was I guess in modern times, as we kind of already talked about, there are video games now that are not, they're experiences. They're not play the hero, be the hero, go do the story.
Right.
It's just
End up accidentally the villain the entire time.
yeah, right. Like you just kind of show up and you follow along, or if it's open world, you go wherever you want and you just kind of do whatever comes up. Or even games like Dungeoneers or things like that, where it's essentially just a completely procedurally generated game, can have very impactful moments in them, just based on the way your character has evolved throughout the game. So I've never been a person in the real world who really appreciates or understands art. It's never been something that I connect with, to be honest.
Yeah, if I look at a painting, I go, cool, that person has talent. And then I move on.
Exactly.
I've never seen a painting that stopped me in any kind of an emotional capacity where I was just like, whoa, that is, wow.
This makes me feel stuff, man.
This speaks to me. Like, you know, I'm big lunk. Like I'm not gonna. That's gonna totally miss me.
Yeah.
But you put it in video game form. You throw something beautiful at me, and you make me experience stuff, and you get me all misty. I'll appreciate it.
100%. So
Fair enough.
it's a different medium, I suppose. It's one that I think probably our generation was the first to really connect with us that strongly, beyond it just being, 8-bit pixels on a screen.
A toy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did either of you play Braid, by the way? That was just another one. You were talking about that. I looked up beautiful games. That was one that Braid was good.
That was Braid was the one with the dying mechanic.
Yeah, where you could reverse yourself back.
Yeah, where you were like, oh, whoop, mistimed that, and then you just all right, I got it this time around.
Prince of Persia did it first.
True.
Man, that is talk about a series that I completely forgot existed.
Yeah, it so did they.
Well, when they gave it to a bunch of fourth graders for the last iteration and then it didn't go well, it was like, yeah, I guess you actually still have to make good games. It doesn't have that name selling power anymore.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Were there any other ones that we wanted to mention in either of these categories? Sort of split them broadly into story-based stuff and stuff that's just pretty.
This is the kind of topic where we'll end the show and we'll all immediately think of 30 games. But
yeah, I mean, just in terms of appreciating its art style, obviously I've always been a Guild Wars fan, but the Guild Wars 2 art style is incredible. It's such a beautiful world. It's got, I can't even really it's just something you should just see. Especially its load screens and stuff. It just has such a different feel to it, and it's like I literally have asked somebody to paint my main character in a painting from that game because it just has that feel to it, like you're in a painting.
Yeah.
Still got to get that painting.
Yeah, still got to get that.
My warrior demands that love.
What was the game? I'm blanking on the name now. Where you play as the wolf. It was a Nintendo. I think it was cell shaded. Was it on the Wii? I remember it being a motion control. I'm just totally blanking here on that game, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah, I don't think I'm familiar.
It was celebrated at the time. Can I read you guys something that's going to piss you off?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I was just kind of trying to see if we were missing anything, and I just typed in video games as an art form, and the first thing that came up was the Wikipedia entry for video games as an art form, and the introductory paragraph reads, "The concept of video games as a form of art is a controversial topic within the entertainment industry. Though video games have been afforded legal protections as creative works by the Supreme Court, the philosophical proposition that video games are works of art remains in question, even when considering the contribution of expressive elements such as graphics, storytelling, and music. Even art games, purposefully designed to be a work of creative expression, have been challenged as works of art by some critics." And that's the entire paragraph you get if you go onto the Wikipedia page for video games as art.
Cool.
All right.
I wonder which politician that rails against video violence in video games wrote that.
Yeah.
The Wii game, Drew, was either Zelda or Okami.
Okami. I was thinking of Okami.
Okay.
Okami. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okami was another gorgeous game. Shadow of the Colossus and Eco and everything that those guys make are visually stunning.
The Last Guardian looked great.
I didn't play it yet. I'd actually really like to. It seems like something that the critiques and complaints I heard about it would bother me a lot less than they would bother other people. So I need to play that.
There's one thing about people who critique video games for a living. Like, it's one thing. I've stopped reading reviews of movies and video games because I learned over the years that it's just opinion. Like, it's just like a personal feeling, and that person is not me, and they don't come from my background or have my experiences or have my likes or interests. How they are able to tell me what they feel about a game, like, it's like, okay, like, from a technical standpoint, if it's really buggy or whatever, like, I would like to know that going in. I would like to know those critiques. I don't need to know, like, your personal opinion on a lot of this stuff. Like, it just, for me, it adds no value.
Right.
Probably more so of movies because, again, I like every movie I see. At least
Plus,
the
it
first
only
time.
takes an hour and a half to watch a movie. So if you don't end up liking it, you're like, nah,
Yeah.
whatever. It could be a bummer to play like 10 hours of a video game and then get into it and find out it's broken like that. But
Yeah.
most games just aren't broken anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, well, and then, Bethesda exists to constantly lower the bar.
But yeah, no, I'm with you. I tend to check them out, but I definitely noticed it around, the Final Fantasy VII remake. It's like, why do I care that IGN gave this game an 8 out of 10 because they thought that there were some textural issues and
Yeah.
some people might not understand. Like, I had a borderline religious experience playing that game. I've never felt the way I felt about any other piece of art. And I'm going to sit down and be like, well, but IGN said 8 out of 10, so I don't know. Like, how do I weigh,
I mean,
like, they care about different things than I do.
could probably
It's okay.
do a whole podcast on the life of paying companies to give you good ratings in the video game scene.
Well, and it would be interesting to actually bring somebody on and talk about it and be like, how
from the scene, yeah.
Like, how valid is this? Because it's really easy for us to be like, they kicked you guys an extra $100K to say something nice. Like, that writer didn't get that $100K. Like, that dude didn't get that kickback. Like,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? Like, it's, I always wonder about the journalism, the video game journalism, and I think those are just gamers who can write, and they came up and they got jobs at the right time. Like we got Drew and I, we were sports fans who could write, and we got a job at the right company at the right time, and now we're sports writers,
Right.
And it's like, bah, how about that? And I tend to view most video game critics in that same light, but
the critic, sure, but when their boss says this game's getting an 8.5 or you're fired,
right. But I want to know, how valid is that? How often does it happen?
Right.
How much is that an actual thing, or are we talking about freaking Pizzagate here? Is that the QAnon of the gaming scene? Is that everybody is convinced this shit happens and it's not valid in any way? I would like to know.
I have no idea.
I don't either. I have no idea. So I have no feeling about it. If it happens, that sucks. If it doesn't, can we shut up about it?
One thing I know happens in whether it's movies, television, whatever, is that these people do get wined and dined a lot of times, and they're going to send you a copy of the game or the movie early. They're going to set you up with it. They're probably going to buy you dinner and drinks, and so they're doing everything they can to get you in a good mood to appreciate their stuff at the very least. So if they're throwing actual money at you. And I don't know, and I'm sure Rudo probably knows, the details of this, because I just don't. I've heard the accusations. I've never really looked into them concretely.
I mean, it definitely has happened, for sure. But I have no idea how common it is.
Right. There's no doubt that a company was like, hey, Superman 64 is going to be bad. We need you to say nice things about it because we're charging $70. There's no doubt, or Daikatana, some flops, that there were some people out there who were trying to grease some of the skids, but is it widespread? Is it more of oh, hey, this one time, this one game came out, or is it this happens all the time and it's just a super shady, it's like paying college athletes, everybody knows.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up on this. I will put it to the two of you to retort, or if you were to write in your own way a paragraph for the Wikipedia opening of video games as art. How would you sell this to anyone who may still in the year 2020 ask you, video games? Really? The floor is yours.
Yes, video games. Really. If you disagree, you're an idiot. Period.
Fill a museum with screenshots of modern day video games of just pretty shit and see if anyone even recognizes that they're from video games. And when the answer is no, then you have your answer.
I love
that
it.
would be a fun game to play with somebody who does not play video games.
Exactly.
And be like video game or painting. Video game, painting.
If I may make a hockey analogy with your two answers to that question, it was like AJ just checked a guy right through the glass and was like, "You're an idiot, get out of here." And then Rudo was like, "I'm gonna do a little deke around this dude, fake everybody out, flip it over the goalie's shoulder, and just trick them completely into them having to realize that I'm not gonna tell them they're an idiot. I'm gonna force them to realize they're an idiot."
It's really just if video games have advanced so much at this point that it really can't. It can't. It's to me, it's insanity that you would think otherwise. And maybe we should go and find somebody that had a dissenting opinion, so that we could just keep throwing alley oops to each other while we dunk on them NBA Jam style. But I just. I like to think I'm a pretty pragmatic person, and that I can hear logic on a lot of sides of a lot of different issues. But some issues there just isn't another side, and I feel like this is one of them. This isn't an issue that strikes me as one that has a lot of nuance to it. Video games are art. There's too many examples of it now. If you want to have this conversation in 1995, it's a much different conversation. Video games were still figuring it out. But you fast forward to today in 2020, this isn't a conversation.
I remember my best friend in middle school being like, "Yeah, dude, but they're not all like Final Fantasy is the exception." And that might have been true at the time. It's just
probably was.
Right. And it's just not now. Not even close. You're right. Like, that's why I read the thing, just because I saw the word controversial. It was like the third word. It's like, video games as an art form is a controversial. No, it's not.
It's really
it's not.
Really, really not.
There are people who.
I'm sorry, but when you get the Supreme Court on your side of something, like, you've hammered home an argument.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on this one today. We obviously could have kept going on this conversation for a long time, and I'm sure we will have more opportunities to talk about it. Let us know out there what your favorite video games as art are. You can hit us up on the DNVR Gaming Twitch channel, on Twitter. You can find us in the lounge, the Discord channel for DNVR members. You got to subscribe to the DNVR to make sure that you get access to that. Buy some merch. What's our sale this week, guys? Last week it was hockey. I don't know. I'm not sure what our sale is.
When it's not a hockey sale, I don't know what it is.
There's stuff on sale at the DNVR merch store. Check it out. Hang around. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel and all of that stuff. We're doing more and more there. We got a lot of stuff coming up. And then tonight on this Twitch channel, we've got Hank playing Madden in a big, big game that we're all hoping he's going to lose, because we root against our own here when it comes to online Madden. And then that's going to be followed up by the DNBA show. RK will be playing Madden on Friday evening in his game. So make sure you're following all that.
I'll root for Hank if he doesn't punt.
I will root for any DNVR who eschews punting in the name of going forward on any fourth down that is longer than 4th and 10.
I won a game on the stream last week where I punted 5 times.
You from stream, yeah.
When you get struck by lightning, we'll know why. Yes, please don't get struck by lightning.
I know, right?
I would be super upset.
Can you imagine? I'm telling you, I'm letting you off the hook for it right now. If I get struck by lightning, it was not AJ's fault. Probably. All right,
if it happens in the next 48 hours, I'm going to feel really, really terrible. Yeah. Anything 49 hours and beyond, you're on your own, bud.
If it happens in the next 48, you have to try again. Then you come to me and be like, you're getting struck by lightning. And then if it happens again...
Then we know AJ's got some weird-ass powers. We might need to study his brain.
Let's not do that.
Well, this has been an interesting end to the podcast today. Thank you all for listening in. Make sure you're following everybody on social media, subscribing to everything, buying merch, helping out all of our sponsors. Download that WGT Golf. It's so much fun. Drink Breck Brew, stay Manscaped, Strava Craft Coffee. You know the deal. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out for us. For AJ and Rudo, I've been Drew Kreisman, and we will see you next time.